The last thing our particle system needs is a little bit of smoke. Now we could just take one of our existing emitters, duplicate it, change out some modules, adjust some settings, and voila, we would have smoke. But I'm going to create a new one from scratch. It's just good practice. So we'll right click, choose New Particle Sprite Emitter. Now this time I did not have a material selected beforehand, so I get the ever so lovely default material. Now we need to change that. So before we do anything though, let's rename the emitter. I'll select it, right click, go to emitter, rename emitter, and let's call this smoke. Now I'm going to jump into the required module, and we need the actual material we're going to use. So if I put Cascade away, back here in the content browser we have m_smoke, and I'll just go ahead and apply that. Now some of these settings are the same as what we use for the flame and glow emitters. So we're going to take interpolation method, set that to random. We're going to take sub images horizontal and vertical and set both of those to 2. So now we're getting some little puffs of smoke. Moving down from here, I'm going to take the spawn rate and pull that back. So if we go down under distribution and it's float constant, we're going to set that down to 10. Let's switch down to the lifetime module. And currently this is a float uniform, which is good, but it's set to a min and a max of 1. So let's set this to between 2.5 and 3.5, like so. Now moving down, we're going to take a look at our initial size. Now by default, this is set to between 25 and 25. So let's take our max and we'll set X to 35. So we get a little bit of variation in our puffs of smoke, although they're kind of looking like bubbles right now. Now down from here, we have our initial velocity. Currently, I'm okay with the velocity that we have. Let me get the scaling system in place, and then perhaps we'll reevaluate the velocity. But right now, I don't think that looks very bad. So next, we have our color over life module. And what I'm going to do with this is right-click it and delete it. It's gone. We're not going to use it. We're actually going to start off with an initial color, and then we're going to scale that initial color over the life of the particle. So I'm going to right-click, come down to color, and choose an initial color. And right off the bat, this appears to be working okay, but let's go into its settings. And its start color currently has a distribution of vector constant. We're going to change that over to a constant curve. What this will allow us to do is change the color that these particles are going to have the moment they're born as the particle system exists. So each time the particle system cycles, it's going to grab another color from along the curve. So let's expand our curve. Currently it has no points, which is why you're seeing black. It's just kind of a uniform value of black. So let's add 2 points. And for the first point, we're going to leave the in value at 0 and the out value at 0. So we're not even going to touch that point. Come over to point 1 and set the in value to 1, or the depth of the particle. And we're going to set the out values to 0.5s down the board. So we're starting off at black, and we're kind of shifting our way up toward gray. Now, these are colors that are being assigned at the birth of the particle, so they're not going to change. It's just we're getting some variation along that curve. That's really how that works. Now, next we're going to scale that color across the life of the particle, which is going to solve 2 problems. One, it's going to allow us to change the color, which is pretty cool. But also, it's going to solve this newfound problem of the particles popping out of existence like little bubbles. So let's right-click, come down to Color, and we'll choose Scale Color Over Life. And we'll start off with the Color Scale Over Life property, which currently has a distribution with a vector constant curve. That's perfect. If we expand it, it has 2 points, also good. And here for our first point, we'll leave the in value at 0. And for the out value, we're actually going to start off. Actually, let's leave that at 1. Come to think of it. And then for our second one, we're going to have an in value of 1 and an out value of 0. So we're actually making the color go toward black. We're starting off at birth with full color, and then we're scaling it back toward black as the particles continue to live on. And you can kind of see that here. The particles are darkening up. Now, against a black background, it looks like those particles are fading away nicely at this point. However, if we change the background color to anything other than black, it becomes clear that the particles are still popping out of existence. So I'm going to set this back over to black because it just looks so much nicer. And we need to fix that problem, and we're going to do that by changing the alpha over life. So alpha scale over life as well. Now this also has a distribution, but this time it's a distribution float constant, which is just a single value. So we're going to change that to a distribution float constant curve so that we can change the value over time. Now it has no points by default, which is why all of our smoke particles just seem to disappear. So let's add 2 points to this. And the first point specifies the birth of the particle by default. Let's set the out value up to 1. And then the second one is almost finished for us. If we expand it, we'll take the in value, set it to 1, which is the death of the particle, and out value will be set to 0. So literally, our particles are now fading away. Even if we change the background color, they're fading away nicely. Okay, let's set our background color back over to black. And we've got that taken care of. Now, moving down from here, we're having a little bit of an issue with these particles just being so tiny. So let's change that next. I'm going to right-click, and let's create a new size module. Let's grab a size by life. And here we have the life multiplier property within this. And this is already set to a distribution vector constant curve with 2 points, such that the first point gives us full scale, and the second point is the point at death. That also gives us full scale. Well, that could be better. So let's start with 0.1. Actually, you know what? Let's start with 0.0, because what we're going to do with our in value of 0, which is the birth of the particle, we're going to take the out value and set that to 0. So these smoke particles are going to start off infinitely small. Then for point number 1, we're going to take the in value and set it to 0.33, which is 33% of the particle's life. Take the out value, and we're going to crank this up to 2.5. So now our particles are seeming to grow. But that's not all. Actually, that looks a lot better already. But it's not entirely where I want to leave off. So let's go back up here to points, and I'll click the little green plus button to add a new item. Now that's going to break our scale for just a moment. Let's take our in val and set that to 1. And the out value we're going to set all the way up to 8. And now our particles will grow up to 2.5 times their scale over the first 33%, and they'll spend the rest of their lives scaling up to 8 times their scale. And now we're starting to get some nice billowing smoke. Now, it would look a lot cooler if this smoke was rotating, so I'm going to right-click, come down to rotation rate, and we'll grab initial rot rate. Let's step down inside its properties, and the float uniform is perfect, but we really need to slow this down and get some random values. So let's set this to -0.2 and +0.2. And now our smoke is nicely rotating. It's looking pretty good. I can almost smell it at this point. Now let's see, is there anything else we really need to add? I guess a cylinder wouldn't run amiss, though technically these guys are starting off so faint that they're kind of working. Though we could just right-click, come down to location, and drop in another cylinder. Now we need to change its settings like we did before. Once again, I'll go ahead and set up the Draw 3D mode so we can see that cylinder. It just makes it easier to understand what it is we're doing. Let's take the start radius, and we'll pull that down to 5 to match our fire. Let's grab our start height, and we'll pull that. We could pull that down to 20. But then if we do that, let's offset the cylinder. We'll actually slide the whole thing up into the air. Grab the start location, expand its values, and we're going to set Z to 20. We'll just cause our smoke to be born from kind of a random area slightly above our flames. Now that looks like everything that I'd really like to add to the smoke. It's really working at this point. Let's go ahead and switch off the Draw 3D mode on that cylinder. The last thing I want to do is turn off the grid, and let's kind of zoom up to where we can see this pretty nicely. And I'm going to click the Save Thumbnail Image button so that now when I close out of Cascade and take a look at our PS fire, we actually have a picture of our fire. At this point, go ahead and save your package, and that's going to wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.